I still remember the way my sister, Alina, clutched her silver locket like it was a piece of her soul. She never took it off. Not when we went to school, not when we fought, not even when we cried. It hung just above her heart, always catching the light like it held something sacred. When we were kids, I'd tease her about it. "Come on, Alina," I'd laugh. "What's in there, huh? A magic wish?" She'd just smile, that quiet, knowing smile, and say, "Maybe someday I'll tell you." I never pushed her. She was the older one, wiser, stronger. Or at least, that's what I believed. We were each other's world. Two sisters surviving in a small town after life had already taken too much from us. Our mom passed away when I was 8, and our dad, well, I was told he died long before that. Alina became everything. My mother, my best friend, my anchor. She worked nights at a diner just to keep food on the table. I'd wait up for her, sitting by the window, pretending to do homework, but really listening for her footsteps on the porch. And when she'd finally walk in, exhausted, smelling like coffee and rain, she'd kiss my forehead and whisper, "We're gonna be okay, Anna, I promise." And I believed her. Because when Alina said something, it felt like truth carved in stone. But that night, the night the locket fell open, everything I thought I knew started to unravel. It was a Saturday evening. We were cleaning up after dinner, just another quiet night in our little rented house. I was drying the dishes while she hummed softly, her hair tied up messily, sleeves rolled up. She laughed at something I said and leaned over the counter. And that's when it happened. The clasp of her necklace snapped and the locket slipped from her neck, clinking softly against the tile. I bent to pick it up, smiling. Guess it finally gave up on you. But when I turned it over in my hand, the latch clicked open. And inside was a tiny, faded photograph. At first, I thought it'd be a picture of us. Maybe one from when we were little, sitting on the old swing set behind the church. But it wasn't. It was a picture of a man. A stranger. He had dark hair, kind eyes, and a small scar above his eyebrow. I'd never seen that face before, but there was something hauntingly familiar about it. Like I'd dreamed of him once, but forgotten the details. My voice came out softer than I expected. "Alina, who is this?" She froze. For a second, her smile vanished. Then she snatched the locket from my hand so fast it made me flinch. "It's nothing," she said quickly, almost too quickly. "Just an old friend." I stared at her. Her tone was off, shaky, nervous. Alina never got nervous. "An old friend?" I repeated, eyebrows raised. "You wear a picture of some random guy every day and never tell me?" She sighed, looking away. "Anna, don't make a big deal out of it, okay? It's just complicated." "Complicated?" I said, trying to laugh it off, but my chest was tightening. "Come on, it's just a picture." Her eyes flickered toward me, and for the first time in my life, she looked scared. I said, "Drop it," she whispered. That silence between us, it wasn't normal. It was heavy, like a curtain falling. I didn't know what to say, so I nodded and walked away, pretending it didn't matter. But it did. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain hit the window. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, maybe some old crush, a friend from before everything fell apart. But the way she reacted, the way her hands trembled when she took the locket back, no, that wasn't about love. That was about fear. I could still see her through the crack in my door, sitting at the kitchen table long after I went to bed, turning the locket over in her hand, staring at that tiny photograph like it was the only truth left in the world. Something inside me shifted that night. It was small, quiet, but it was there, a seed of doubt, buried deep, and once doubt takes root, it never really lets go. In the days that followed, I tried to act normal. We'd laugh, eat breakfast, talk about bills or groceries like nothing had happened. But every time her hand went to that silver chain around her neck, I felt that same unease crawling up my spine. I started wondering about things I'd never questioned before. Her late-night shifts, her random weekend errands, the way she'd step outside to take phone calls. Little things that never used to matter suddenly did. One night, I even dreamed about that man in the photo. He was standing in the middle of a foggy street, reaching out for me, whispering something I couldn't hear. When I woke up, I realized my pillow was wet from tears. I didn't remember crying. I told myself it was just a dream, that I was overthinking it, that Alina was still my sister, my everything, and nothing could ever change that. But deep down, I already knew something was terribly wrong. People always said Alina and I were like night and day. She was calm, graceful, always in control. The kind of girl who could walk into chaos and somehow make everything quiet. And me? I was the storm, emotional, impulsive, always asking why about everything. But she never made me feel small for it. When I messed up, she was there. When I broke down, she held me. She was the one person I thought would never, ever lie to me. We didn't have parents, not in the way other kids did. Our mom died of pneumonia when I was 8 and Alina was 16. She dropped out of high school the same year, just so I could keep going to school. I used to watch her get ready for her late-night shifts at the diner. She'd tie her apron, fix her hair in the cracked bathroom mirror, and hum that same old tune Mom used to sing. And every single time before stepping out into the cold night, she'd touch that silver locket just for a second, like it was a ritual. I'd ask her, "What's so special about it?" She'd smile and say, "It's a reminder that love can survive anything." Back then, I thought that was beautiful. Now, it just sounds like a warning I didn't understand. Our life wasn't easy, but it was ours. We lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment with peeling wallpaper and a fridge that made a weird humming noise every 5 minutes. But it was filled with warmth, the smell of coffee, burnt toast, and Alina's laughter echoing through the walls. Every weekend, we'd sit by the window, watching the world go by. I'd talk about college, about how one day I'd make enough money so she wouldn't have to work double shifts anymore. She'd listen quietly, smile, and say, "You're gonna make it, Anna. You just have to believe it like I do." She never talked much about herself. Never about her past, her dreams, or her pain. She carried all that in silence, like it was her way of protecting me from the weight she already bore. I guess that's why I never questioned her late-night calls, or why sometimes she'd come home with red eyes like she'd been crying. She'd just say work stuff, and I'd let it go, because love doesn't question. It trusts, but love also blinds you. The more I thought about that photo in her locket, the more the image burned into my mind. The man's soft eyes, that faint scar, the way Alina looked terrified when I saw it. I started noticing her mood swings, how her hands shook when her phone buzzed, how sometimes she'd step out on the porch and whisper into the night, "I can't do this anymore," and when I'd ask who she was talking to, she'd just shake her head and say, "Nobody. Anna, go back to bed." There's something about secrets. They rot the air around them. The warmth in our home began to fade. Our dinners turned quiet, and every night I'd catch her staring at that locket, her thumb tracing the metal like it hurt to hold. One evening, I found her in the kitchen, just sitting there with her head in her hands. "Alina?" I whispered. She looked up quickly and forced a smile. "Hey, didn't hear you come in." I sat across from her. "You okay?" She hesitated. Then she said softly, "I'm just tired. You know how life gets." But something inside me didn't buy it. I wanted to ask about the locket again, to beg her to tell me the truth. But I didn't, because part of me was scared. Scared that whatever truth was hiding behind her eyes might destroy everything I believed about her. Still, I couldn't help myself. The next day, while she was in the shower, I walked into her room. Her dresser was covered in small things that felt like her: perfume, hair ties, bills, and that framed picture of us from my high school graduation. For a second, I smiled. Then my eyes fell on her nightstand. The locket wasn't there, but her phone was. I hesitated. My heart was pounding so loud it felt like it filled the room. And then it buzzed. A message popped up. "From an unsaved number. See you tomorrow. Same place." "Don't be late," I froze. "Tomorrow? Same place? What place?" When she came out of the shower, humming like nothing was wrong, I pretended to be scrolling on my phone. But my mind was spinning. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about that message, about the man in the photo. Were they connected? Who was he? Why was she hiding him from me? By morning, I had made up my mind. If she wouldn't tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. She left for work around 6. I followed her 5 minutes later, heart hammering in my chest. I stayed far enough not to be seen, watching her through the fogged-up windshield of my old car. She wasn't heading toward the diner. She turned down a different road, one that led out of town. Trailed behind her for nearly half an hour until she pulled into a small park near the edge of Lake Mason. I parked a few blocks away and crept through the trees, hiding behind a bench, and there she was, standing near the water, waiting. Then he showed up. The man from the photo. He walked toward her slowly, and the moment she saw him, her whole face changed. Not fear. Not guilt, it was relief. They hugged, long, quiet, like two people who hadn't seen each other in years. I felt my stomach twist, and in that moment, the sister I thought I knew, the one who held me through every storm, suddenly felt like a stranger. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. I just watched as she wiped her tears and whispered something into his chest. And when he held her tighter, I felt something in me break. I drove home that night in silence. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, and for the first time in my life, I didn't know who my sister really was. If I had known the truth hiding behind her perfect smile, I would have never opened that locket again. After that night at the lake, everything changed. Alina acted like nothing happened, like she hadn't just met a stranger in the dark and hugged him like her life depended on it. But I couldn't unsee it. Every smile she gave me after that felt like a lie. Every good morning sounded like a cover-up. I wanted to confront her right then, to scream, "Who is he?" But I didn't, because I needed to know the full truth before I let her know I was watching. The next few days felt like living in a movie where I didn't belong. I'd catch her texting late at night, her face lit by her phone's glow, whispering things I couldn't hear. When I'd walk into the room, she'd lock her screen so fast it was almost comical, and during breakfast, she'd pretend everything was fine. "Sleep okay?" she'd ask, smiling, her eyes avoiding mine. "Yeah," I'd say, stirring my coffee, pretending too. But inside, I was unraveling. I started looking for patterns. What days she left early? What nights she came home late? Sometimes she'd say she was working a double shift, but when I called the diner, her coworker said she wasn't even scheduled. That's when I knew this wasn't just some old friend. There was something bigger, something she was hiding from me. So one evening, I decided to follow her again, properly this time. No hesitation. No half-truths. She left the apartment around 7:15, her usual late-night shift hour. I waited a few minutes, then slipped into my car and kept my headlights low as I trailed behind. She didn't go toward the diner this time. She drove past downtown, past the gas station, into a quiet stretch of old highway that led to the outskirts of Willow Creek. My palms were slick with sweat. I could see her taillights blinking through the fog. Finally, she turned into a rundown motel. The kind with flickering neon lights and a half-broken sign that said, "Vacancy." My heart sank. I parked across the road, watching her get out of the car. She looked nervous, constantly glancing around, pulling her coat tighter, and then he appeared. The same man from the Locket. He walked up to her, his hands buried in his jacket pockets. They didn't hug this time, but the way she looked at him, it was intimate, familiar. They talked for a while, voices too low for me to hear. At one point, she grabbed his hand, tears filling her eyes. He looked down, said something that made her flinch, then pulled her close. I felt my stomach twist again. This wasn't just about love or friendship. It was deeper, messier. They went inside one of the motel rooms. I sat there for what felt like hours, the rain tapping against my windshield, the wipers squeaking every few seconds. I couldn't stop staring at that door. When she finally came out, her face looked pale, her shoulders heavy like she was carrying the whole world. She drove off, never once looking back. I wanted to follow her home, but something made me stay. That man, I needed to know who he was. So I stepped out of my car, hood up, and crossed the road. The air smelled like gasoline and rain. I peeked through the motel window. The curtains were half open, and what I saw made my heart skip. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at a picture, the same photo that was inside Alina's locket. Except this one was bigger, framed. He ran his fingers across it slowly, and I swear I saw his lips tremble. Then he picked up his phone. Through the glass I couldn't hear, but I read his lips. He said her name. "Alina." I backed away before he could see me, heart pounding in my throat. The drive home felt endless. When I walked inside, Alina was already there, sitting on the couch, pretending to read. Her hair was wet, like she'd showered to wash the night off her. "Hey," she said, looking up casually. "Hey," I answered, trying to sound normal. She studied me for a second. "You okay? You look pale." I forced a laugh. "Just tired." She nodded and went back to her book. But her hands, they were shaking. That's when I realized, whatever was going on, it wasn't just about betrayal. It was something that scared her too. The next morning, while she was at work, I went through her things. Not because I wanted to betray her, but because she already had. Her drawers were mostly empty, except for a small box tucked behind her sweaters. Inside it were a few letters tied with ribbon and some old photos. I flipped through them one by one, Alina, as a teenager, smiling. Then one photo stopped me cold. It was her, standing next to that same man. But this time they weren't strangers. They looked related. He had the same eyes, the same shape of face, and on the back of the photo, written in her handwriting, were the words, "Me and Dad, 2007, my vision blurred." My breath caught. Dad, the man she said was dead. The man I never got to meet, he was alive. And she had known all along. I sat there for what felt like forever, my hands shaking, the photo slipping from my grip. The sound of the clock ticking on the wall felt like thunder. All those years of silence. All the nights she said, "He's gone." All the times she told me we only had each other. Lies, every single one. That night at the motel, the tears, the hugs, it all made sense now. She wasn't seeing some stranger. She was seeing our father, the father she'd been secretly meeting while I grew up believing he was buried in the ground. I didn't know whether to scream or cry. But I knew one thing for sure. The sister I thought I knew had been lying to me my entire life. That night, I sat in my room staring at the wall until morning. And as the first light crept through the window, one thought echoed in my head. I needed answers. No more lies, no more half-truths. I was going to find out everything, even if it destroyed what little family I had left. That night, the sister I thought I knew became a stranger I needed to expose. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, our father's face, staring back at me from that photograph like a ghost refusing to rest. All those years she told me he was gone. All those birthdays she said, "He would have been proud of you." She lied. To protect me, maybe. But it didn't feel like protection anymore. It felt like betrayal. By sunrise, I was pacing the living room, clutching that photo in my hand, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and disbelief. How long had she known? How long had she been meeting him behind my back? And why? When Alina came home from her shift that morning, I pretended to be asleep. I heard her footsteps, slow, heavy, then the soft click of her door closing. I waited until I heard the shower running, then slipped into her room again. The box was still there, but this time I opened every single envelope. Inside were letters, old, yellowed, written in a man's handwriting. The first one started with, "My dear Alina, I wish I could explain everything." I sat down on the edge of her bed, unfolding each letter with trembling hands. They told a story I didn't want to believe. Our father hadn't died. He'd left Mom, left us, started another family in another town, and Alina had known since she was 15. He had reached out to her back then, promising he'd come back for both of us someday. But he never did. The letters continued for years. Apologies, excuses, promises that never came true. And then there were receipts, hotel bookings, wire transfers, even old photos of him with another woman. The truth hit me like a wave I couldn't stop. She had been meeting him secretly for years, keeping his memory alive while feeding me lies. I didn't know what hurt more, that she betrayed me or that she chose him. When the shower stopped, I shoved the letters back and slipped out of the room. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped my coffee mug when she walked into the kitchen. "Morning," she said, drying her hair with a towel. Her tone was too casual, too normal. I forced a smile. "Morning." She poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone. Her calmness made me sick. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Who is he?" I blurted. Her hand froze midair. "Who?" she asked, too quickly. "The man from the Locket." The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop between us. She set her cup down slowly and looked up at me. "What did you do, Anna?" "What did I do?" I snapped. "What did you do? You've been lying to me my whole life." Her lips parted, but no words came out. I pulled the photo from my pocket and threw it onto the table. She stared at it, and then at me, her eyes wide with something between fear and guilt. "You said he was dead," I whispered. "You said we didn't have anyone else." She swallowed hard. "I can explain." "Explain?" I laughed bitterly. "You've been meeting him for years, haven't you?" Hiding it from me, lying straight to my face. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. "You let me grow up thinking we were alone," I shouted. "You let me hate a man who was still alive." "Because he deserved it," she screamed back suddenly, her voice breaking. Her breath hitched as she gripped the edge of the counter. "He left us, Anna. He left Mom when she was sick. He left you when you were a baby. I begged him to come back, and he didn't. For years I waited. I hated him too, but then, one day he showed up." She paused, shaking. "He told me he was dying." I blinked, stunned. "What?" Her eyes filled with tears. "He said he wanted to make things right. He begged me to forgive him. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't tell you, not after all the hate I'd built up in you. I thought, if you knew he was alive, it would break you." Her words hit like thunder, loud, confusing, unbearable. "He was dying?" I whispered. She nodded slowly. "He had cancer. I started meeting him a few years ago, in secret. I wanted to see if he'd changed. I wanted to make sure he was really sorry." My throat burned. "You should have told me." "I couldn't," she said quietly. "You were still so angry at the world. You blamed him for everything. I didn't want to ruin what little peace you had left." "Peace?" I scoffed, tears stinging my eyes. "You call this peace? You let me live a lie, Alina." She reached for me, but I stepped back. Her hand dropped to her side. We stood there in silence, the sound of the clock ticking louder than our breathing. Finally, she whispered, "He asked about you every time we met. He wanted to see you before he died, but I told him no." "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Because I wanted to protect you from the man who destroyed us." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said softly, "You weren't protecting me. You were protecting yourself from the guilt of forgiving him." Her eyes widened, and I saw the truth land in her like a knife. The silence stretched until it hurt. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry, Anna. I just wanted to fix what was broken." I looked at her. My sister. My protector. My liar. And I realized something I didn't want to admit. She wasn't evil. She wasn't heartless. She was broken too, but the damage was done. I picked up the photo from the table and held it out between us. "This," I said softly, "this isn't love, Alina. This is pain you've been pretending to heal." She reached out to take it, but I pulled it back. "I don't know who you are anymore." Her tears finally spilled. "Please don't say that." I turned away. "You already did." As I walked to my room, she whispered behind me, "He's gone now. He passed away 2 weeks ago." I froze. "He left this for you," she said, her voice trembling as she placed something on the counter. It was the locket, the silver one I'd seen my whole life, but this time it was open. And inside, beside the photo of our father, was a folded note. I unfolded it with shaky hands. To my little girl, the one I never got to hold. "I'm sorry. I hope one day you'll understand why I had to leave." "Dad!" My eyes blurred. The note fell to the floor. I wanted to scream, to throw the locket across the room, to erase everything I'd just learned. But I couldn't, because now I understood. The man I hated had died begging for forgiveness, and the sister I loved had destroyed herself trying to give it to him. I thought the truth would bring us closer. But it only tore the ground from under me. That night, I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at that silver locket, realizing that love isn't always clean, and family isn't always kind. Sometimes the people who save you are the same ones who break you. The night I decided to confront Alina, the sky looked bruised, deep purple clouds crawling over the moon, as if even the heavens were nervous for what was about to happen. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I kept tracing the outline of that silver locket in my pocket, the same one that had once symbolized her love. Now just evidence of a lie that wouldn't stop echoing in my mind. She came home late again, keys jingling, her heels clicking on the wooden floor like a slow countdown. I was waiting at the kitchen table, lights dimmed, a cup of untouched coffee turning cold beside me. When she saw me, she froze. "Hey," she said softly, like she was testing the water. "You're still up?" I didn't answer. I just placed the locket on the table between us. The metallic sound cut through the silence like glass cracking. Her eyes widened. For a second I saw fear, pure naked fear. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "I think you mean how long have I known," I said, my voice shaking but steady enough to sting. She looked down, lips pressed tight, like she was swallowing a confession she'd rehearsed too many times. I could see her chest rise and fall, fast, uneven. "Who is he, Alina?" I asked. "The man in the photo." Her silence was louder than her lies. Then she sat down slowly, folding her hands, staring at them as if the answer might appear written in her palms. "You weren't supposed to find out this way," she murmured. I almost laughed. "You mean I wasn't supposed to find out at all?" She finally looked at me, eyes glassy, the kind of guilt you can't fake. "He's our father, Emma." The words felt like a slap. I couldn't breathe. I blinked hard, thinking I'd misheard. What did you just say?" Her voice cracked. "Dad. The man in the locket is Dad." Everything inside me twisted. My father, the one she told me had died when I was 6, the man I'd grieved, written letters to in my diary, spoken to at night when I felt alone. Alive. All this time. "You lied to me," I said. My voice wasn't even mine anymore. It was hollow, distant, trembling with every word. "You made me think he was dead." Tears slid down her cheeks, one after another, quiet and unrestrained. "I had to," she whispered. "You don't understand what he did. He left us, Emma. He left me. But he promised he'd come back for both of us someday. And I believed him." I wanted to scream, but my throat felt locked. "So you met him?" "Behind my back? You visited the man who abandoned us, and you let me grow up believing he was gone forever?" Her voice broke again. "Because I couldn't tell you the truth. You were a child, Emma. You wouldn't have survived knowing he chose them over us." The word "them" hit me hard. "You mean he has another family?" She nodded slowly. "A wife, 2 kids. A house in Vermont. He tried to make me part of it, but I couldn't. I couldn't forgive him. I just needed to see him. To understand why." I felt my knees weaken. "So you've been seeing him all these years?" "Not all these years. Just recently," she said, voice small. "He reached out after Mom died. Said he wanted to make things right." I stood up, chair screeching against the floor. "Make things right? After vanishing? After letting us starve? Letting you work 3 jobs just to keep me in school?" She flinched. "I know. I know what it looks like, Emma. But he's sick now. He wanted forgiveness before it's too late." I couldn't even look at her. My heart was pounding like thunder, and every beat felt like betrayal. "Forgiveness?" I said bitterly. "You forgave him, didn't you? You let him back in while lying to me every single day." She reached out, desperate, but I pulled back. "I did it for you," she said, almost pleading. "I didn't want you to hate me. I didn't want you to hate him the way I did." "Well, congratulations," I said coldly. "Now I hate both." Her face crumpled. She covered her mouth like she could hold the sobs in, but they came anyway, raw, broken. "Emma, please. I'm sorry. I just wanted to protect you from the truth." I shook my head slowly. "Protect me? You built my whole life on a lie. You didn't protect me, Alina. You made me live in your version of the truth." The silence that followed felt endless. The clock ticked behind us, counting the seconds of a bond that was dying right there in that room. Finally, she whispered, "I never wanted to lose you." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You already did." Then I turned away. My hand brushed the locket on the table, and something inside me snapped. I picked it up one last time, opened it, and looked at that face again. The man who was supposed to love us both equally, but only chose one. My fingers shook as I dropped it on the floor. The sound of it shattering echoed through the house like a closing chapter. She gasped softly. "Emma, don't—" I walked to the door without looking back. The air outside was cold, sharp against my skin, but somehow it felt cleaner than the air in that house. Behind me, I could hear her crying, quietly, almost apologetically. For years, she'd carried that secret. For years, I'd carried blind love. That night, we both set them down. As I stepped into the dark street, I realized something that chilled me more than the night wind. Forgiveness isn't always the path to peace. Sometimes walking away is, and maybe that's what the locket breaking meant. Not the end of family, but the end of illusion. The morning after I left, the house felt colder than it ever had before. Maybe it was the silence, the kind that sinks into your bones, that makes even the ticking of a clock sound too loud. Or maybe it was knowing that my voice would never echo off those walls the same way again. I'd moved into a small apartment downtown, just a one-bedroom with creaky floors and a window that faced a brick wall. But at least it was mine. No lies, no secrets, just me, my thoughts, and the sound of distant city traffic that never really stopped. At first, I told myself I was fine, that I didn't need Alina, that I didn't need anyone. But every night, I'd still catch myself setting out 2 cups of coffee by habit, one for me, one for her. And then I'd stare at the empty chair across from me until the cup went cold. I tried to work, to keep my mind busy. But even at the office, her voice lingered in my head. "Emma, did you eat? Emma, wear your coat, it's cold." She was gone, but somehow she was everywhere. One evening, I drove past our old street. The lights in our house were off, curtains drawn. It looked abandoned, like even the walls had given up. I parked across the street, engine running, heart pounding. I wanted to knock. I wanted to ask if she was okay. But pride kept my hands glued to the steering wheel. As the days turned into weeks, her absence became something physical. The silence didn't just fill the room, it filled me. I'd scroll through old photos on my phone, laughing and crying at the same time. Her smile in those pictures, it wasn't fake. Whatever she'd done, she'd loved me, in her own broken, complicated way. Then one evening, I came home from work and noticed a single envelope slipped under my door. No address, no sender name, just my name, written in her handwriting. Alina. I froze for a moment, afraid to open it. My fingers trembled as I tore it carefully. Inside was a short note, barely a few sentences, written in blue ink that had bled slightly from tears or rain. "I'm sorry for protecting you the wrong way. I thought keeping the truth from you would save you from pain, but all I did was lose you. I've gone away for a while. Don't look for me, not yet. When I'm ready, I'll come back. Love, Alina." I sat on the floor, reading it over and over until the words stopped making sense. Gone away. Where? Why? I picked up my phone a dozen times to call her. But what would I even say? Come home? Or I forgive you? I wasn't sure I was ready for either. For weeks, I lived between anger and ache, half of me still furious, the other half quietly missing her. Sometimes I'd catch a whiff of her perfume on an old sweater and feel my chest tighten. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night, certain I'd heard her footsteps in the hall. But it was always just memory playing tricks on me. One rainy evening, I went back to our childhood park. The swings were empty, the air smelled like wet earth, and the same old oak tree stood where we'd carved our initials years ago. E+A. It was still there, faded but visible. I ran my fingers over the carving, and for the first time since that night, the anger softened. I remembered the little girl she was, holding my hand on the first day of school, defending me from bullies, teaching me how to braid my hair. That was Alina too, not just the liar, not just the secret keeper, the sister who gave up her childhood to raise me. I sat on that park bench for hours, watching the rain drizzle through the streetlights, thinking about how strange love can be. It's not always clean. It's not always fair. Sometimes it's made of lies told out of fear. When I finally stood to leave, I looked up at the gray sky and whispered, "I hope you're okay." No anger. Just a quiet prayer. Back home, I placed her note on my nightstand. I didn't frame it. I didn't hide it. I just left it there. A reminder that some goodbyes aren't permanent. They're pauses. Every morning I'd glance at it before leaving for work. And slowly, life began to move again. Inch by inch, breath by breath, I started cooking again. I joined a local art class, something she'd always wanted me to do. And one day, when I caught myself laughing with strangers over spilled paint and bad coffee, I realized something. Healing doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just sneaks in quietly. Still, there were nights when I'd catch myself staring at the door, half expecting her to walk in with that tired smile and say, "You won't believe what happened today." But the door stayed closed, and yet, the silence no longer felt like punishment. It felt like space. Space to forgive her, to forgive myself, and to remember that love doesn't vanish. It just changes shape. Maybe one day she'd come back. Maybe one day we'd sit down again. 2 cups of coffee, 2 broken hearts, and 1 long overdue conversation. Until then, I kept living. Not perfectly, but honestly, and that somehow felt enough. Months passed, and life slowly stitched itself back together. The ache in my chest didn't vanish, but it softened, becoming a quiet reminder of what we'd lost and what we might still have. Then, one afternoon, a small parcel arrived at my door. No return address, just my name. Inside, wrapped carefully in soft tissue paper, was the silver locket. It looked almost the same as before, but it had been polished, repaired, and open, and inside, 2 photos. One was of me, smiling at the camera, holding a cup of coffee like I'd just found a little peace in the chaos. The other was Alina, her hair loose around her shoulders, eyes glimmering with the kind of love and mischief only she could carry. No words. Just the photos, and in that quiet, I understood. It wasn't about secrets anymore. It wasn't about betrayal or lies. It was about connection. Despite everything, we were still sisters. Still bound by a love that had survived the worst of storms, I held the locket close to my heart. Some locks are meant to be opened, not to destroy love, but to understand it. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. Did you like my story? Which city are you listening from?